ready to go. This will have about another 5 seconds and we'll be ready to begin. Hello, welcome to Milipol 2015. We're here today to talk about unmanned aerial vehicles. With us today, I have a panel of 4 representatives from various parts of the French UAV industry. And I'm going to ask all 4 of these gentlemen to introduce themselves in turn. We'll start here on my left with Francis.
Yes, good morning, Dan. So I'm Francis Duruflet. I'm a sales manager for ECA Group for the aerial UAV. So ECA Group is a company working in robotic industry. We are doing various type of robots like underwater, UGV, ground robots, and also now UAV with our specific product. So I'm in charge of the sales for the French and from the French market.
Okay. And we have Philippe Roy.
Yeah.
Philippe?
Good afternoon. I'm the president of Aerosurveillance, a company which is established in the south of France. We make mini and small tactical UAVs for defense, civilian security, and civilian applications. I spent myself about 20 years in the US working for different programs like the Predator and the Global Hawk and other programs like this. And we've been using that experience with a couple of the managers to start this company about 4 years ago.
All right. And Johan.
Good afternoon. So I'm Johan Boucher. I'm in charge of the business development of Novadem. So Novadem, we are a UAV manufacturer. We're based in the south of France. And we're working on both sectors, the civilian sector. We equip major companies in the field of inspection. And we have another branch for defense and security. So for about 10 years, we equipped the French Procurement Defense Agency, technical section of the French Army, and also the French firefighters who are equipped with our system.
And Patrick.
Hello, Patrick Oswald. I am from Airbus Defense and Space, and I am the director of Key Account Manager for France. So Airbus, I think it's not interesting to present the company. It's a big one. The defense part is in charge of what was military flying. It could be fighters, transport aircraft, but also UAVs. So we are one of the leaders in military UAVs in Europe. But also we have some civilian application. Especially we acquired a couple of years ago a subsidiary named Surveycopter with one company for the small UAVs. And I was in charge of UAV program a couple of years ago.
All right, thank you, Patrick. I should finally introduce myself. I should have done that at the beginning. I'm Dan Kazita. I'm a security and defense consultant based in London. Thank you. I want to start with really what is new, because we have a broad selection of industry here. We have startups, we have the very large to small, medium-sized enterprises, I would say. We've got old, new, everything between, but also this is a new and growing area. 20 years ago, when I was a young Army officer, I didn't really ever think any of this would be where it is now. I remember, you know, drones were big, heavy things. They cost many millions. The Predator, I remember the old days. We're in a whole new era, and we're doing many things with UAVs that we wouldn't really have thought about. So I want to ask each of you, really, what's new? What's new, particularly in the last year or two, since we've really had a Milipol conference? So I'm gonna ask for a volunteer. Who wants to go first? What's new? What can we have here?
So I can give a brief introduction of the history. I will not be long, but if you ask what's new in UAV industry right now, the novelty is that since a few years, technology improved. Technology allows the system to reduce in size, to reduce in cost. And this was a few years ago the beginning of the civil market of UAV. because equipment or sub-assembly which were very expensive and used for military equipment or military missions now are available on the civil market at a very affordable cost. And you have since 5 years approximately major company providing UAV, small UAV, what we call micro UAV on the market. This has been very impressive, and we all know because of our activities that it's always difficult to explain to people the difference between this major in quantity and sales, this major trend in small civil micro UAV market, which is coming mainly from China. Maybe 80% of the market is from a Chinese company. And associated to that, we have had a few companies who had started to develop products in the mid-size, in a mini UAV category, which is up to 20 kilograms.
Okay.
With the aim of making something which can answer the needs for various applications, which were mainly, for example, agricultural, but also in the civil security domain. So some equipment, some platform which were able to take payloads, because in a UAV, what is important is not the platform itself, is the payload.
Yes.
The payload is doing the job.
Yes.
The platform, the aerial vector, is only there to handle the payload at the right time.
Okay.
So you have now, in terms of novelty, solutions that are able to provide added value sensor which will detect various threats.
Okay.
Okay, in all domains, and this is now already in use for civil security, like the firefighter in France, for example, who are already using UAVs, and in other area of civil application, you will have also a lot of products that will be used.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to ask Patrick from Airbus. What's the perspective from your end of the business? You're obviously at the large end of the aerospace business, being one of the giants in this world. Where do you see the UAV market? Well, also the technology. Where do you see it from your perspective?
You asked the question, is it new? I intend to think that it's a new old story.
Yes.
We are working on UAV now, I think, for 30 years. So in that sense, there's nothing new. In this domain of security, what could be new? I think it's like in the military domain. You have users who are not considering aerial surveillance before. It was the case for the military people, because they imagine at that time it could be only fighters, and the surveillance by air is something that is not natural in the mission. Now we see security people who consider that now that aerial surveillance, broadly speaking, is something interesting for many applications you mentioned. Now the question is, we have military systems that are supporting the military forces. When you have a large platform of 1.5 ton, I think no security units have the money to afford it. So there's a strong support for the military forces, first. And second, when we address this new customer security, there's the question, is this UAV market, or what will provide UAVs in terms of added value in terms of cost also? So they compare with the price of a small aircraft, they compare to the price of a helicopter, and they say, okay, if you can do this mission for this amount of money, I will buy them. Okay. And in that sense, new products that are more the smaller are more competitive in terms of price, and if it's a local mission, they could be affordable. And you see in several stands from the Ministry of Interior, several solutions for that. But I think the key what is really new is the fact that they consider that to see from above is important, and now it could be competitive in terms of price in function of other means they could have. And it's quite important. We are also in space, and I don't know if you have in mind the cost, for example, for a satellite image, high resolution, you order from one day to the other, it's about 1,000 euro with 50 centimeters resolution. So the UAVs will be in competition with all this environment, flying unmanned platform or satellite that will provide this information. And us, and I think all my colleagues around the table are trying to find where is the money, that means where it could be competitive in terms of images or solutions.
Okay, thank you. Johan, what's new? What, from your perspective, we've already talked a little bit about the general industry trends here and the change in technologies. Cost is going down, size is going down, but on the other hand, it really is an established business. It's a new old story. What have you got for us that's interesting?
If I talk, for example, of the firefighters,
Yes.
French firefighters in the south of France are equipped with our system for about 1.5 years.
Okay.
What's important for them is not to make something fly.
Yes.
What's important for them is to share the information. So the advantage of the UAV is it's really fast to deploy. So at Novadem we have developed a very compact system. It's fully foldable without tools. You can deploy it in less than a minute in the field to have a better understanding of the situation.
Okay.
So we have also developed a specific connection, 3G, 4G transmission, so that you can share the information with the command post. And even the president can have an overview of the situation thanks to its smartphone. So what's important, it's not the UAV itself, but the whole solution.
Exactly.
The software, the transmission, etc. And recently, we also won the supply bid from the Ministry of Interior. So the French forces will be equipped with our system. We don't know exactly yet for which application, but I know that in 2016 there will be a lot of events, sport events. So I think it will be used for this kind of situation.
All right. Thank you. And Philippe.
Well, it is effectively a relatively old story, but it's also a very evolving space. Two big trends at least. There's probably more than that, but two big trends is one is the access to national airspace. Lots of people, especially in the civilian applications, have to deal with the, how does you integrate safely UAVs into national airspace? A lot of technology development, which is still ongoing, partially resolved for the large systems, not well resolved for the smaller one. That will carry on probably another 5 to 10 years before people can routinely fly, with just applying through the regulations, through the regulator to actually fly in national airspace. The second trend, which is probably has to do with more with where we are here, which is the trend for armed UAVs, or at least UAVs which have dissuasion or weaponized payloads and stuff like this. And we've been working, for example, with the Group La Croix, which is doing pyrotechnics payloads on grenade launchers, for example, which we've tested and demonstrated now to a 2-year program. But I think I was told that I don't know where the information comes from. There's about 30 or 45 countries that are developing UAVs with weapons. So it's not just the French.
Yes.
Everybody else, if you look at the Chinese are embarking a lot of, there was one that crashed early in 2015 in Nigeria, which was upside down, was two, very well-defined weapons underneath the wings. So it is a trend that our militaries are going to have to, insert in their own thinking and what they're going to do.
Thank you for that.
Then, if I can just add
Feel
one
free,
point,
please
because
do.
You were talking about
Yes.
what's in future, what
Thank you,
would be
Francis.
the next step. We can also plan for an association of UAVs or an association of of robotic solutions that are all together working on a same disaster. For example, you can imagine that on a major disaster where you have an environment where there is water, there is buildings that are destroyed,
Yes.
you may need multiple sensor and multiple unmanned product, like
Yes.
a product that is going underwater, looking for people at the same time talking with a UAV in
Yes.
the air, progressing towards this area. And the fact that you can associate different type of unmanned system, ground vehicle, aerial vehicle,
Yes.
that are able to talk together could expand or could make a better understanding of the situation and could give another view which can be more effective to the people that are that will need to assess the situation. So we could see that somewhere there is a sort of a swarm of UAVs, all type of UAVs that are working together to collect all the information that will help the crisis management team.
Okay, thank you. That's a very valuable point. One of the things I want to talk about that is, I've sort of, well, formulated this as we spoke. It seems to me that there are, I can talk about three different barriers or constraints or obstacles in the employment of UAVs. One is the dependency on communication infrastructure. Flying a UAV is one thing, but it has to talk. And the more you want it to do, the more it has to talk, the bigger the bandwidth. You want lots of video and thermal imaging for firefighting and meteorological sensors and all this.
Yes.
You have to put all that information somewhere and do something with it. And it gets more complicated if you have multiple platforms, as our colleague here said. So we have the dependency on communication spectrum is one thing. We have both the, I would say, the legal and practical issues of airspace management. It's big if you're flying something the size of an airplane, you file a flight plan and you follow it like it was, you know, an Airbus flying to London. But if we're talking about things that are the size of this cup, and we're talking about 600 of them flying around the place, it becomes a more complicated issue. So that's the second issue, the airspace management issue. I would say the third issue is political. The possible, in some countries perhaps, the toxicity, if you will, of the idea of a drone. Has military uses of drones in the lethal sense, as Philip said, has that poisoned the discussion in some places? For example, I can speak in the UK, in the United Kingdom, the minute a police authority starts saying, oh, we're going to use a drone for traffic enforcement, the media and people start to go a little bit nuts. So the word drone, for example, has become associated with dropping Hellfire missiles onto people.
Yes.
It has. So do we have to deal with the political barriers and the toxicity of the concept? I'm not suggesting that any of us here has the answer to these three problems, but if you could shed some light on one of these three barriers, that would be excellent, because I think that would be most illustrative. Yes.
First, Dan, I think it's very good points. In France, we created, I think 1 year ago, what we call a Conseil des drones civils. And I think one of the main targets of this council, with all the administration, the industrial, small, big companies, is to try to address all these points and to have a real discussion with the authorities to do that. So I think it's a good sign from the community that we pull all together all our knowledge, all our vision, to have a good exchange and to try to go further. One step is a new regulation that is proposed today by the Prime Minister offices, is to limit to have a certain sequence for the professional drones and to have a certain regulation between 1 kilo and 25 kilos. And you're completely right. I think the global problem and the global issues we had also for the military point of view, but we have for our civilian UAVs, is how we integrate in the environment.
Yes.
That's true that, as you mentioned, helicopters or piloted aircraft are not waiting for UAVs. They are flying every day, everywhere. So we are not saying, okay, we are UAVs, go outside and we'll have the full spectrum of frequencies of space.
Yes.
So we have to discuss to see how we can do that. And step by step, I think with DGSA, which is the office in charge of the air traffic regulation, we go step by step, but I think compared to other countries, we are progressing. And all my friends around the table, colleagues who are trying to make services or to deliver UAVs have now certain rules to follow. And you mentioned also technologies. I think one big step, and it's also what we discover between brackets for the military domains, is we will have to have a safe UAVs, which is mandatory. And I can tell you, to be authorized to fly over what we can say not very dense population, you have an enormous work to demonstrate that your UAV is safe. And it's an important point.
Okay, yes.
Just to complete.
Yes, Francis.
Indeed, as Patrick said, we are all working in a sort of conseil. It's a team of people where you have manufacturer, you have authority, you have everybody working together to raise and to find a solution for the exact three items you mentioned. One of the biggest items for me, and which is hard to fight against or to solve, is a frequency band. Because it's out of our capacity. Frequency bands are dealt internationally through ITU, and it's not so easy to say, okay, no, we want more band. Everybody wants more frequency band. So I think this is a limitation also, because frequency band and power within this frequency band is also a direct link with the security of flight.
Yes.
Once you lose the link with your product, you're not in a safe condition. So the longest you can keep the connection with the UAV, the better it is. So this is for the frequency band, which is a tough problem for everybody. It's not our company, it's all players in UAV industry in Europe, by the way, because and regulation depends on each country. We have here in France a regulation signed 2012 for civil application, so civil entity, but in some other countries there is no regulation, or some other country have banned. For example, in Morocco, they banned the UAV because they wanted to just avoid the illegal fly over some area. So they say no more UAV. So in some countries it's totally banned. In some countries there is no regulation. So it's the stronger who have the rules. And hopefully in France we have a regulation, but which is giving some limitation of actions.
Philip.
You mentioned the communications. It's a little bit like internet in the early 90s.
Yes.
A lot of people are trying to do something to get their space, and if you talked about somebody in the early 90s about internet, there's people that would basically say, this is going to disappear. And drones are here to stay.
Yes.
A lot of issues. Some of them have been described earlier, regulations, technology, and so on and so forth, but it's here to stay. And the countries that basically ban those things, they prefer to do this instead of being exposed to other bigger problems. Sooner or later they will follow. If you talk about most of the French country or French-speaking countries in Africa, they pretty much follow what France is doing. If you do the English or the Anglophone countries, they follow what UK or the US are doing, with the FAA. Communication is an issue, but you talk to the people that work on satellites and stuff like this, they're increasing the bandwidth. The line of sight issue is a little bit trickier, and there's also competing with the cell, with the cell frequencies, which tend to expand at huge speed. The privacy is a big issue, but the privacy is not worse than, I don't know what the exact number is, but there's probably millions of cameras installed on walls everywhere, on parkings. There's probably a lot less cameras from UAVs in the air than there are cameras on the...
But we have a problem also with cameras, because you are obliged to shadowing the angle of vision to be allowed to see only inside or outside. So
actually, when the FAA...
regulation.
Yeah, when the FAA basically tried to generate, it took 3 more years than anticipated to
Yes.
issue the NPRM in the U.S. Their primary issue was really not safety, even though it is an issue, but it was privacy. Their biggest fight against different lobbies and stuff
Yes.
like this was privacy. Of people saying we don't want to watch.
Okay.
There are solutions being developed, however, in many of those areas for.
Okay.
But what I think, globally speaking, which is important, is, as I mentioned, the customers or potential customers of security now is testing step by step. So they acquire several equipment, they say, oh, this equipment is okay. They test it, they say, no, I want something else. So it's important that they also progress in their knowledge in how they are progressing. And for us, it's very helpful because even if it's not our products, there may be some mistake or they say, oh, it's a good direction. And we see what are where is the real market. Because we are also businessmen. What is important is to see what they need and what they can afford. And for example, we have also initiative we launched in the Conseil to see what are because there's a beginning of long elongation. That means long-range systems that are not flying so high because they are not allowed to do that. I am a pilot of a small aircraft. I don't want to have a big UAV in front of me on control. It will not be pleasant. But in long elongation, I think it's a good idea because we have the local application for these small UAVs, but there's what we call, for example, what is power plant or it's cables or it's fuel pipes. It's important that we provide them solutions that they have not with a piloted system or even with satellite. So it's quite interesting.
All right, we only have a few minutes left. I want to ask about something that has come up in other unmanned applications. It's not uncommon to work with autonomy in underwater systems where your communications, for example, is much more confined, or underground use of UGVs, mining applications, for example, where really your RF communication is quite limited. Where does autonomy fit with UAVs? Obviously, we're not really at the point where we can have a completely autonomous vehicle, but it strikes me that there is a role for autonomy and a decision-making on a system, particularly when it loses communication. What does it do? We don't want it falling out of the sky if it loses signal. So if a few of you could comment a bit on autonomy in our last few minutes, I think that would be interesting.
It's a long-term. It's a long-term thing, really. If you look, we're working with a project with EDF and SNCF, the National Railways. That's the very structure of the project. Is they want to increase the autonomy of the different machines. You have machines more specialized to do one thing and another doing another things, and how they communicate together. It's 3 years away. In 3 years, we may have a prototype. Autonomy is, if you look at the roadmap from the US DoD, which is probably the people that are putting the most amount of money on that space, they're looking at 10 years before, and the regulator will have a lot to say about, this autonomy. Imagine right now what gentleman from Patrick was saying about how much safety you need to have to fly over urban places. If you put more autonomy in the drone, then this autonomy will have to be extremely safe before it's allowed to fly in national airspace in a regular fashion.
I think what Philippe and Johan said are very important. So, from the platform point of view, we don't think that autonomy is mandatory, except for something we have not talked for the moment, is very high altitude, very long range systems with flying 5 days, for example. We need a capability to have several autonomy of navigation. But autonomy for a system, I think, is only for safety reasons. So I think all the systems now have a recovery mode, more or less complex, because if we have a problem, for example, of data link or GPS or whatever, we need, at least for the regulation, to have this capability to come back in a certain era. The other point, I think autonomy is more, because it's really, especially when you will have long missions in terms of endurance, is to have in the sensor, what you mentioned, capability for the sensor to find its target with a kind of autonomy. Imagine a typical mission is to find an event that will last a couple of minutes. and you observe the scene during a day. So if you have not the appropriate algorithm to find this target when this event when it will occur, we have an issue. So autonomy, we have a capability of autonomous detection, I think is important. Now for the flight, even outside for countries that have no regulation, I think it will be a more secure mode. But autonomy for the sensor, I say yes.
It's indeed a very good point you last mentioned, the autonomy. And we all have experienced that because of what Patrick said, that we gave to our platforms the necessary autonomy to be able to recover or to treat any sudden event, link loss, battery, critical battery, loss of GPS and all that has been treated. The rest of the autonomy, for me, would be more linked to the missions that we want to perform. And so the autonomy will be associated with the payloads. And I guess this is a payload that will take the necessary autonomy to then give some order to the platform, to the aerial vector. I need to go there because I observe some lights there, so I want to apply a new flying plan. Okay. So this is, for me, the next step in autonomy. It will come from the payload.
All right. Well, we've reached the end of our assigned time. Does anybody have any last brief 30-second comments they'd like to make on the subject of UAVs? No? If not?
Yes, on UAV for security, I think it will not be the miracle, but we have all together to design and to know how we will progress. I'm sure that these UAVs will develop, for sure. Mm-hmm. Now, how all together we are conducting this development, but a master development, not in all the direction. We are all together to control this direction. I think it's important.
We will not come back. I mean, we have started to use UAV. We all find that our customers, operators find a usage and a need in UAVs for civil application and security. We will not come back to the older situation. So there is a future of UAVs. Now the question is how we can improve and what type of services we can bring to this solution for the customers.
I think that captures it very neatly. The genie is out of the bottle. We can't put it back in. And we have to manage it now. And I think that's really an interesting and proper conclusion. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and thank you for participating.
Merci.
Merci.
Aujourd'hui et